People first organizations will win in the future of work.
Your only real asset is your people.
We all want purpose-driven work.
HR-led organization is the
I'm
future.
sorry, but leaders don't lead empty desks and empty shop floors.
Welcome to the People Strategy Leaders Show. I'm your host, Sri Chellappa, founder and president of Engagedly, and a serial entrepreneur in technology, films, and music. This is where we talk to people leaders, business strategists, and organizational savants about leading in the time of change. What is working, what is not working, and more importantly, what we should be thinking about. Stick around to the end of the show. We will reveal how you can be our next guest. And now, let's engage. Hello and welcome to People Strategy Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Sri Chellappa. I'm joined today with Tina Greer. Tina is an HR leader whose extensive expertise in managing HR and transforming operations has been pivotal in her career trajectory. With over 25 years of experience, Tina has navigated the intricacies of HR within a variety of organizational contexts, ranging from startups to Fortune 500. Her diverse background spans not only strategic and operational HR roles, but also internal and client-facing roles, providing strategic guidance and hands-on support to organizations. Grounded in a human-centric approach, Tina recognizes the universal truth that people are at the heart of every organization, regardless of location. Having lived and worked abroad for over 15 years, she brings a global mindset to her work, seamlessly translating her international experience to our ever-changing landscape in the US. Tina's successes lie in her ability to bridge divides and foster collaboration. She excels in transforming ambiguity into clarity and addressing complex human capital challenges head-on. Her passion for building strong middle management has been a constant thread throughout her career, recognizing its pivotal role in driving organizational success. Welcome to the show, Tina. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
The topic that we're going to talk about today is driving middle management success, and that's one of your favorite topics. A lot of organizations focus so much on either building top leadership or focus on engaging their people and driving results through them. But I don't think they give enough focus to middle management from what at least I've seen, because middle management gets pushed from both sides. So what is so interesting about that topic that you really feel so passionate about, and why is that important?
What you just actually explained about how middle management sandwiched in between leadership, which gets a lot of attention in general, and the frontline employees. However, the piece in the middle of the middle management team, they're the ones, as data's proven over and over, are the ones that actually really have the most and the direct impact on the frontline team, and by therefore the customers and the experience that the customers are having in engaging with. And for some reason, it's when companies are constrained, time constrained, resource constrained, it seems to be the middle management that kind of takes the brunt of a lot of that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we also see a lot is companies, when they lay off teams, they lay off a lot of managers sometimes as well, thinking, oh, they're just overhead. I don't necessarily need that many managers. And then it ends up really hurting the team. So from your experience, what have some of these poor practices that you've seen? And then we'll talk about some of the best practices. But let's talk about the poor practices first that you've seen in your career, which obviously has been a lot of global companies internationally as well as US. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of things that are done very badly.
Right. One common situation that I've seen quite a bit is organizations putting employees into a supervisory middle management role because they have been fantastic employees in what they've done functionally. Great people. They have a lot to give to the organization and to others. And moving from a individual contributor role to a manager role requires some significantly different skill sets. And so looking at someone at what they're doing now, and they're doing such a wonderful job, putting them into a managerial role and just letting it happen may or may not get the results that an organization wants to achieve. And I've seen that in larger companies, smaller companies who are more resource constrained across industries. And it's a mindset that intelligent, high performing people will just get in there and figure it out. They may or may not. Different people have different skill sets, and whether it comes naturally of whatever they need to do to be successful in that role may or may not happen. It's throwing caution to the wind in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And I think the challenge there might be is that if somebody's doing it really well, where do they go next? Maybe they're capped out, right? They're like, okay,
Right.
you're already in the top of the bracket for your role. Maybe you go from analyst to a senior analyst. Then what? There's no director analyst. You either become a director or a manager of the analyst. That's
Right.
how have you seen companies solve for them, something like that?
In different ways, some effectively and some not so effectively. To that point, often in the industry where I've spent a lot of time in consultancy, it's very much of analysts and consultants and a manager. And as someone continues in their career, it's transforming a lot from the analyst, manager, that's a change. And then a change again when becoming more senior into sales. So the same person who might be absolutely fantastic at the analyst, consultant, might master the managerial roles and not be able to do sales, or vice versa. However, there's normally one career trajectory. It's just straight up this path. And what I've seen organizations go both ways. Of one, that's the way we do it, and it's either up or out. Other organizations can face that and work with, are there dual career paths that could apply to different people's strengths, of more of a super project manager, for example, or what if not that title, but that type of functionality of these are your strengths. So organizations who can work through that and try to define what are the other options? How do we retain good employees and recognize that strengths and interests are different?
One thing I have seen, one example of actually that is very well is when people are self-aware as well. Some employees are really good performers, like you said, and then they get promoted because they are asking for what's next for me. Obviously, I've crushed every goal. Everybody in my organization loves me. My customers love me. We hit all our numbers, our targets, our goals in our projects that I've been on. What's next for me? And then the
Right.
managers of that person is pressure to figure out, I got to do something for this person. Otherwise, this person might leave. And just increase the salary because HR is saying, oh, they're already top of the band. I can't increase there unless you move them to a different band.
Right.
And so there's some level of flexibility, I think the HR team or the salary band structures need to probably have as well. I'm thinking, what are your thoughts on that? Because unfortunately, there are salary bands that get stuck. If you're an analyst and you're the best analyst the company can have, but they can only pay you so much because an analyst band is this,
Going through a couple different things. So understanding from the employee's point of view of what they're really looking for is key. For the analyst in this example, what are their skill sets outside? What are their interests outside of the analyst role? And opportunities may exist, taking that information, and for the organization to consider how might those skills be utilized more broadly. So instead of this is the band just for that particular role, thinking more of if it's broadened instead of deepened, because I think a lot of the bands are because you go from junior level more senior and the bands are getting bigger. What if it's flipped on its head and instead it's maybe how is that expertise carried further into other areas of the organization? And that could also add a significant amount of value. It's just a different way than the traditional thinking is. And I think that's an example of where organizations can work with what the organization needs and what is going to keep the employee engaged. So it's not just, oh, I've hit the limit, so
Yeah.
I've reached
Yeah,
the limit of
exactly.
my development within the organization.
Yeah, there's a big movement going on, right, with that in terms of companies moving to skill-based taxonomy on work
Mhm.
and having fluidity in their work, mobility, internal mobility around that, where they could do different jobs in the same organization without having to necessarily say, this is my title, this is the only thing I'm doing. So I think there's
Right.
some level of that going on in the organization, which would make them a little bit more almost like an internal freelancer. They're doing different things as well. But there's a core work they do, but they also go out and play roles in other projects and other functions as well.
And I think that feeds into as well for so many companies now, every industry, is there's change happening at some level. And the more that the team members are versatile, agile, can handle the change and ambiguity that comes with different roles, that's a an exceptional skill set that companies want to keep internally. And also for team members themselves and thinking about maybe in 5, 10 years, whatever, there's a goal they have that doesn't necessarily involve working in even in the same industry they're in, but how can the company extend their tenure there by thinking about, okay, I understand you want to go there, how can we help give you those skills and the company's still getting the benefit of their expertise while they're doing that, so prolonging the time of the person in the organization. I think it's a benefit for both companies the more that they can really sit down. It might be a completely new way of uh, designing the teams or whatever it is in the organization that would take some change, but has some significant value.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so let's talk about the middle management success, right? In terms of what,
Mm-hmm.
so obviously we've established that not everybody needs to be a manager, and you can still pay somebody and compensate and reward and recognize somebody without them being a manager. Because to me, manager is just another role. Like maybe an analyst is a role, and manager role, your skills are around managing more than doing individual analyst work. If you came from being an analyst,
Yep.
what have you seen the best companies do or the best organizations do to build a strong cadre of middle management?
Mm-hmm. First, I'd say the before diving into what is that for the middle management, this is all caveated with with senior management actually really buys into this. I feel it, the organization senior management has got to make this a priority. As an organization, if the senior leadership is not so bought in, it's not going to happen. Assuming the culture is there, the organization wants to support middle management, understanding within the specific organization what makes that role successful in their organization. And it might be some slightly different things or vastly different things depending upon the organization. However, I think the majority around it is thinking through problem solving, being able to give feedback, communication, and relationship building with their team members. Something it's between different studies I've seen 50 to 58% of people leave organizations when they're voluntarily leaving is because the relationship with their direct supervisor isn't providing them what they need.
Right.
That's a huge amount. And so just ensuring that those people can just establish and maintain those relationships as a first step would go a long way towards retention.
So what else, in your experience, what have you seen, what have you done implementing in some of these programs or developing that you've seen really good success with?
Yeah. A couple of things, quite a few different things. But in an organization, a consultancy firm I worked with years ago, in that organization, we were experiencing some significant turnover. And we pulled together data on exit interviews from employee surveys to uncover what were the real issues. And we were finding that team members and new managers in particular weren't feeling supported by like the next level. That's be a director level in this particular organization. And really working with the director level to understand how is that communication, or how should that communication then be happening, of giving the managers, for example, more autonomy so that they're able to gain the experience and also make some mistakes, but then have that safety net of working together and collaborating with someone. So they're learning more and more, shadowing where appropriate, on conversations with other team members, so that they're learning how to do that, or perhaps working more closely with someone on developing performance feedback for some of their employees. Really, like there's a difficult message. It's always going to be a difficult message from time to time that needs to be delivered. How do you do that in a way that the person you're giving it to actually leaves feeling, okay, I get that. I can do something with that. And it's a bit of a skill and can be learned. So it just providing the combination of training, of shadowing, of on-the-job opportunities. I think a combination of those, which also is a good thing, that it doesn't need to be always really expensive. It's not sending people out for a course of thousands of dollars. Companies with limited budgets and limited time can work those opportunities in.
Yeah. And the other thing that I have seen work, a lot of organizations do, is to build a mentoring program in the organization, or a coaching program where you get a mentor or a coach from a completely different department. So there's no reporting relationship challenges there. Your performance in your team does not impact that person. There's that level of separation. Stuff like that help in your implementations as well?
Yes, absolutely. Years ago, when I worked with, that sounded really bad, the emphasis on the years ago, but when I did work with Carrier Corporation, they had a wonderful, and they still might, I just am not involved with it, have for MBA graduates a rotational global program. And one of the points that made that so successful was the implementation of global mentoring. As someone's moving around functionally globally, having a central contact that was always watching over, helping, being someone to bounce ideas off, having been in their place before, understanding the challenges of working in, if you're moving to a new country, you're going to be there for so many months. You need to get in, be credible, be empathetic, learn the culture, learn the management style, and then move again. It's wonderful. It's exciting. It can be very lonely. It can be very challenging. It's a whole mix. And having the person who's bouncing ideas off of, giving advice, sees someone grow in their experience during the couple of years was exceptionally helpful for both. The parties got something out of it, but then also I can't get the words out, really supported retention goals once that was implemented.
Yeah, that's a great example. I know that manufacturing companies, especially the manufacturing companies that had really good management practices for decades, have that. Carrier does, which, like you said, and I know Ford back in the day did too. I'm sure they still do. A lot of the auto manufacturers have that rotational program before you become, then you pick where you want to be, and then you grow into it, and then you have some kind of a coach or a counselor. So I want to ask a slightly different question now. In terms of the tools, what are the different tools that would you recommend for management support to really drive a strong middle management?
I have worked in organizations as far as just some tools, seen some very interesting use of personality tests that have, I am still surprised really how insightful that they can be. There are multiple different ones out there. However, organizations that pull the findings from those into their management or leadership overall training, I think are really doing something next level, in the sense of really thinking through, as a manager, for example, knowing myself, what are my insights? Where do I normally go? How can I develop that differently? And then once you start pulling in, and these are the people I work with, and this is how they're functioning. How does that all interact? And I think really building an understanding within the organization of what are a person's drivers, how can you become more adaptive, where are your natural strengths. I find that's
And the
really interesting.
style of communication, style of collaboration. Do you prefer a
Exactly.
phone call versus do you really do not like, I don't know, Zoom
Do you
call?
want data? Do you want just words? Do you need pictures? Do you want it crisp and short? Do you want a storyline or a discussion?
Yeah.
And yeah, the internal or introvert, extrovert, it's your decision making management style, all of that
Yeah.
is
How I like
I
to
think they're
work is a good one to
dental.
know and communicate too. Like one of the things that I struggle with sometimes personally is that I like to work with data. So all my
Mm-hmm.
discussions with my directs and my discussions with anybody else, it's always about data because it's like the only way to I feel this is my view, right? In my discussion, I'm like, where were we a week ago? Where are we now? Where are we going? How are we progressing towards that? I want to look at data
Mm-hmm.
to the extent we can. Not everything can be distilled down to data, but at least some level of something that's evidentiary in nature, whether it is a list of activities you're working on or a list of things you're trying to accomplish. I always want to focus something. And some people just like a loose conversation. They just want to generally talk
Mm-hmm.
about their life. First of all, they'll talk about their dog and their weather, which is fine. I like doing that too, because you really want to understand the person and build that relationship. But then they talk about the different challenges they're facing in their role and things like that, which are also important discussions to have. And there's a style that some people prefer. They want to have those more unstructured conversations, and some people like more structured conversations. I like to know, okay, after this meeting, what are the next steps? Can we outline that and make sure that we follow up on that? Things of this nature. There are
Mm-hmm.
some good things we
Mm-hmm.
need to, I think, on both sides, but you can really
Yep.
swing from one to the other. And the middle management in this situation here needs to be first of all aware of what type of personality they are, and then also need to know that their team understands who they are and they understand what the teams are as well. So talking to your point on
Mm-hmm.
assessments, and then some level of self-reflection can provide that.
I think so. I think so. And particularly for individuals who are just moving into those roles, some people are naturally very self-reflective. And just as many people are not. So really having that information, having empirical data is very helpful on that. I remember one of the first performance reviews I had when I was working in Paris, and my supervisor at the time told me to rate yourself. It's like, just do it yourself, and then we'll go over the results and see what I think. And then, oh my gosh, they were so different. I perceived myself, and I thought I was quite a self-aware person, and it was very different. But so there are opportunities for me to do things differently, better, and even with such differing views, the way in which it was delivered wasn't, and so this is awful and you'll always be awful. It's more of, these are just some different pieces of feedback you can take. Here's some plans of how we can, get you that different experience. And it was a really interesting exercise. The company didn't do the personality typing that is more prevalent today of the different versions that are out there, but just having that self-awareness presented to me. I didn't have the self-awareness, maybe that's it, but having the information presented to me actually really it helped significantly.
Yeah, that's very insightful. Although one way to argue that is saying, was the manager, your manager at the point, clear about what they were expecting from you so that you could, this was the expectation, this is how I did. And if the expectation wasn't clearly set, then you were like, oh, I did all these things, but maybe the expectations were on a completely different
That's a
track.
good question. Uh, I two things. I think there's the bit about what one does and how one does it. So there's a goal to achieve. At that time, it was in a procurement department. So there's a goal to achieve savings that one makes in different areas. That can be accomplished, and it can be accomplished in significantly different ways as
Yes.
far as one's personality. So I'm American. I went to work in Europe. There's some differences about how things are done. And I get things done, but do I get it done in the way that's also the best for the wider team? Not to say I'm a particularly abrasive person, but at the same time, there are cultural differences. And learning the how is a lot of the culture as well, just as much as what are you doing? Can you do procurement? Yes. Did you smash the targets? Yes. Are there ways that you can do it as well that have additional benefit for the wider team in building these relationships in a different way? So I think that was the part that's not captured always in the goal setting of
That is true.
organizations.
That is true. Yeah, we always talk about the what and the how in our performance reviews, discussions with our customers as well. In our platform,
Mm-hmm.
we have a platform for doing that, obviously, Engagedly,
Yeah.
which has components of what and how that you can build. The what is the goals, OKRs, KPIs, whatever that is. The how is your behavioral goals, which are driven by typically by the organizational values or by your competencies based on your role or other types of software aspects, but they still need some evidentiary aspects to it. How did you exhibit those behaviors
Mm-hmm.
that make that? And I think the best organizations do both. And it's not just
Right.
what, because you could be achieving the what, but leaving dead bodies on the way.
Exactly.
That. Talking about that assessment, do you recall what assessment that was that you found quite insightful in your experience?
When I was working at Carrier, they didn't do those assessments, but recently, since in the past 10 years, I've been in the US working with a REIT consultancy. Everyone who comes into the organization takes the Myers-Briggs
Right.
test. And those then become, at the time I was working there, and they're growing so fast, I'm not sure how they fit it into a digestible chunk of information. But in meetings, we'd have sheets with every person listed in whichever particular box that their personality is in. And there would be trainings throughout the year just about personality types. What does that mean? How do they like to see the information? And the projects we were doing were very data heavy projects. So how do different people want to see the information? How do we work together with teams? What's motivating for our team members? What turns them on? What turns them off? All of that. And so it actually was just such a piece of a part of the culture in just how we work. This is how we work. We recognize that people are different. We recognize that there's a way that we can all improve in working with our colleagues throughout the organization.
Mm.
And then in working with clients, although we didn't know what their results were, it was just having the information internally. Then you could use it to understand clients better, be like, oh, I think this is more their personality. So let me adjust what I'm presenting or how I'm speaking with them, whatever it is, engaging them with more of that mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
Focus.
And then I think, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've not taken MBTI in, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years now. But I've heard that
Mm-hmm.
it actually can change over time too. So you might want to
Mm-hmm.
do it every few years, if not more frequently.
Yeah. That's funny that you mentioned that, because when I first took it, the Myers-Briggs, it would have been just about 10 years ago for the first time. And I forget what my acronym was then, but I was focused on process and data. And that was my thing. And now I've taken it more recently, and I'm an advocate. Let me see for those people out there who follow this, INFJ. But this is much more of a people focused personality type. And I think as I don't know, changed over the years, now I feel like, oh, yes, this is definitely where I am. When I think about just structure and process now, it feels confining and just, oh, that wouldn't motivate me at all.
Yeah.
Personally, I do find it's true. I'm not sure if all people change, but I did.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Tina. It's been a pleasure chatting with you on the topic of building strong middle management. And then so many different ways to do it. So there's no one way to do it. Obviously, having rotational approaches with a mentor, having tools like assessment tools, having some sort of a shadowing over time that grows into the role. So many different ways to actually do it, but having a thoughtful approach and supporting your managers in another one is a big one that I'm my key takeaways from this discussion. Is there anything else you want to add in terms of organizations looking at ways to build a strong middle management?
I think the key is, the commitment, and then just start doing it. Again, it's not an endeavor that has to take a significant amount of a cash injection to make it happen. It's a lot of just the commitment to doing it and integrating it over time into the ways that an organization works.
Yeah. Awesome. Where can people reach out to learn more about what you do and learn more about you?
Please look at my LinkedIn page for Tina Greer, and my email and phone number is located on there. So please be in contact with any questions, comments.
Thank you, Tina. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Sri Chellappa here. Thank you so much for listening to the People Strategy Leaders podcast. If you are a successful leader or a people strategist who would like to be on this program, please visit engagedly.com/People Strategy Leaders podcast. If you got something out of this interview, would you share this episode on social media? If you know someone that would be a great guest, tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag People Strategy Leaders. I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you don't miss any episodes, go ahead and subscribe. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and mean a lot to me and my team. Want to know more? Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter @Sri Chellappa. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time. And thank you to Patrick Ramsey, sound engineer at Kalinga Production Studios, for recording and mixing this show.